Recently, Elementor announced that they were purchasing Strattic, a hosting company that specializes in headless WordPress. Now you're probably asking yourself, what the hell is headless WordPress and should I really care? Well, let me just quickly break this down into oversimplified layman's terms so we can kind of all understand and get our heads around it. If we look at WordPress right now, there are two different components. There's the admin or the dashboard where you create your content, upload your media, do all those kinds of things. You then have the front end of the site. So when you create a new post or a page, you save it, you then push that out to the live site. And what happens is your browser assembles all those different components, the PHP, the data from the database, and all the other things with it. That takes time, and the bigger the page, the more complex the website, the more things going on behind the scenes with WordPress, the longer that can take. That results in slower websites. So when you go over to headless WordPress, this changes ever so slightly. You still have the admin section of your WordPress site, so you can still create your content, your pages, your posts, and so on. But once you save or create a page or post, that's where headless WordPress changes things. So using Stratic, once you click save, you created that page or post, the Stratic servers will combine all those components into a HTML file and then store that on their servers and deliver it via a CDN. So what happens is when your user goes onto your site and goes to your new post, they will get a HTML version of it that's already been created and compiled and saved onto various different CDNs around the world. The experience is much, much quicker for them. So you'll see a noticeable improvement in the speed of delivery of your website. But also the other benefits are because WordPress is no longer being used to output that data, you get rid of all the security issues you have with the likes of a tool like WordPress. You also get speed increases, you get security increases, and various other benefits from using something like headless WordPress. So that's it in a kind of simplified nutshell. So what I'm going to do in this video is we're going to take a look at Strattic. Now it's been purchased by Elementor. We're going to spin up a server. We're going to test it out on a 30-day free trial, which you can do yourself. Links will be in the description below. Okay, so this is the Strattic website. Let's go ahead and say try for free. And now we can just input our basic information. The nice thing about Stratic is it doesn't require a credit card or any payment information for your 30-day trial, which is something I do appreciate. So let's go ahead and set this up. So once I've input my basic information, I'm simply going to click on create an account. All I need to do then is confirm my email address with a little confirmation code. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. Once that's done, I'm going to confirm my account. There we go. We've now created the account. We're going to get redirected to the login. So I'm just going to quickly log into my account. And there we go. There's my dashboard. Now, breaking things down, you can see we've got a getting started guide, which I would recommend taking a look at so you kind of get an understanding of how to start working with Stratic, because it is a very different way of working to what you're used to if you're coming over from just using WordPress in its standard vanilla format on shared hosting, those kinds of ways of working. So you can see we can go ahead and we've got some options on the left-hand side for our dashboard, our account, our team, and support. And what we're going to do is we're going to just simply go ahead and click to add a new site. We're going to give this a name. We'll click on create. Now this generally takes a few minutes because it's kind of working the same kind of way as a cloud setup. So it's going to go ahead, it's going to create the server, set things up on there, install WordPress, kind of get the basics in place for us. This does take a few moments. I'm not going to bore you with this. I will speed this part up because this isn't really particularly important or integral to how the whole process works. Okay, so there we go. Once that's finished, we're now taken over to this section, which allows us to head over to WordPress and start working, or we can go ahead and explore the site details. Now, before we go any further, there's something I want to quickly explain how this works and how this differs from working in a normal WordPress environment. There are basically three different components to working inside a headless version of WordPress. There's WordPress on the server, which is a typical WordPress where you can log into your admin and do all those kinds of things. You then have a preview version of your site, which you can use as a kind of staging site to push your updates over to it, test everything's working, and once you're happy, you can move that over then to the third part, which is the actual live site itself. So it's a kind of three-stage process of how you work with headless WordPress. But once you kind of get used to this, it's incredibly simple to get started and also kind of understand. So coming over, you can see that we now have different sections for our site details. We've got our WordPress connection information. Now this is the WordPress account, the WordPress setup on the actual Stratic server. It's worth noting that while you're working on this, it will be active and you can work in your normal environment in the dashboard and so on. However, On inactivity, after 40 minutes, this will spin down to reduce the overhead on the server or for various other different reasons. So just be aware that while you're working on it, it'll work exactly the same as a normal WordPress site. But if you leave it and you come back tomorrow or come back an hour or two's time, the site will have spun down. This helps in the fact that you don't have WordPress sat there where if someone had the login details and they had the link, they could access it. So it improves your security. Next up, you've got your preview site. Now, your preview site is a static version of the site done through Strattic. So this is no longer WordPress. This is just the output in a preview state. You can use this when you make changes, and if you kind of consider it like a staging site, you can make your changes, you can update things on the WordPress site, you can push that over to your preview to make sure everything is working the way that you want, and then when you're ready, you can push that over to the third and final component, which is your live site. So this is your www.mydomain.com, and that's where the website would actually reside. Now, one of the limitations of working with the 30-day trial is I can't actually connect a real live domain. This is something you need to upgrade your plan to. But apart from that, everything else still works in exactly the same way. I just have a temporary domain that's assigned to me when I created my 30-day free account. And if you test that, this is exactly what you will have. So now that we've got those basic pieces of information, we can go ahead and we can log into our site and take a look at creating a basic website, which we can use as a starting point. So all I need to do is just simply go over, open up my site, and then go and log into the actual dashboard itself. To do that, all I need to do is come over to the left-hand side. You can see under the preview site, we can say Edit in WordPress. We'll click on that. That'll open up a new tab, and now I'm going to open up WordPress. So let's go ahead and just install WordPress now, or configure it at least. So let's just go through the process. So like I say, I have found this a little bit on the slow side in comparison to using something like SiteGround. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just create my site. So I'll speed this part up because you don't need to see this. And there we go. We've now installed WordPress. Let's log in. And again, just log in as normal. Now you can go through this. There's a nice little wizard here that'll take you through 4 or 5 steps to show you how you can actually use this. There's some tutorials and some guides, but I'm going to kind of show you all this anyway. So we'll just close that down. And as you can see, we've now got WordPress installed. Let's just close all this junk out of the way. Okay, so up at the top, you can see we've got a new entry. This is the Stratic kind of icon, and this allows us to do a couple of things. Now, at the moment, because we don't have a site created other than just a basic blank, and we haven't pushed this to the live or to the sample preview site, all we get is full publish to live or full publish to preview. But we will get more options in there when we start to add content, make changes, and so on, which, again, I will show you in a moment. So let's just quickly hop back over to our basic account. Let's come into our preview connection and let's open this up in a new window. So you can see, because we haven't pushed this to the preview or the live site, we're still just working on the WordPress location or the WordPress container on the actual Stratic site. Nothing has been pushed over to the actual preview or the live sites. So we'll come back and take a look at how to do that in a moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install a starter site using Blocksy, just so you can kind of see how all of this works when we push things over and how the whole process of pushing to the preview, pushing to the live site and so on works. So I'm going to quickly do that and then come back. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and installed Blocksy, Blocksy Pro, and the plugins associated with it. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to use one of the starter sites that has Elementor installed, so we can use that to find out what it's like inside the environment and the dashboard, and how when we push things live, how everything kind of works out. So we're going to be using this travel site because this has Elementor as one of the options. Now, it's worth noting at this point, there are some restrictions on what you can and can't do with Headless WordPress. One of the key ones is we can't use WooCommerce because the checkout forms and so on don't actually work. And this is one of the limitations of working with Headless. There are some limitations on the types of plugins. I'll put a link in the description below so you can check out what you can and can't use. Yes, you can still use some forms. Elementor Pro's forms are supported, as is Contact Form 7 and 1 or 2 others. So I would recommend checking that out if you are considering moving over to Headless WordPress, either with Stratic or one of the other tools that allow you to do this, to see what you can and can't use. So there are going to be some limitations that you may have to find workarounds for if you're used to working with specific types of tools. Like I say, WooCommerce is definitely one. You can still use it with tools like Ecwid. You can embed a Shopify checkout page into your site and so on, because they're kind of using external services. But inbuilt shopping cart side of things don't really work inside you using WooCommerce. So bear that in mind. So let's go ahead and import this. We'll say we want to install a child theme. We'll click on next. We'll say we want Elementor and we'll click on next. And contact form 7 is perfectly fine. That is one of the ones that's supported. So we'll click on next and we'll say we want everything to be installed, including the content. So let's go ahead and let that download, install the plugins and so on. And then we can move on and take a look at how this all works inside Stratic. Okay, so there we go. Now everything has been set up. We click on customize just to go back to the dashboard. So now that we've got the site all set up and we're happy with it, the next thing we need to do is take a look at pushing this over to the static version on our preview domain. So as we saw a little bit earlier on, currently nothing is actually on there. But to rectify that, all we need to do is come up, make sure preview is selected, and you see we only have one option at the moment, which is full publish to preview. What this will do is this will push everything over, everything on the entire site. Now, for the first time, whenever you create a site, you're going to need to do a full publish to both the preview and the live sites when you're ready to go live. However, once you've done that, we have more options. So instead of pushing everything over, you may only want to push the changes you made over. You'll have that option, and you may only want to push over the post or page that you're currently working on, and you can kind of do that as well. So let's do the full published preview first of all, and this is going to take however much time it takes, depending upon the complexity of the site, how many pages you've got, the size of the site, all those kinds of things. Because the conversion process is kind of going on behind the scenes on the Stratic servers to take it from your dynamic site using WordPress, Elementor, whatever you're using together, to the static HTML version, and doing some other things in the background as well. So you are going to need a little bit of patience with this. But generally, you only need to do this the first time when you create your site. Then when you want to push changes afterwards, you're basically just going to push those simple changes over when you add a new page, post, those kinds of things. So we'll let that run through. And as you can see, we're almost through at the moment. We're up to nearly 75%. So this is, again, all in real time. So I'm not speeding this up. You're seeing exactly how long this is going to take. Once that's completed, what we can then do is we can move back over into our Stratic account and we can open up our preview site and take a look exactly what this looks like. And we'll have the fully fledged site all set up inside there, and we'll have the WordPress version of it on the WordPress location until we finish. And like I say, after 40 minutes, that will spin down. So once this is finished now, we can see we can go ahead and we can preview our site. So let's do that in a new tab. And there we go. There's our site. If we take a look at the top, you can see our domain has preview written in it. And this is telling us we are currently looking at the preview version site, not the live site and not the WordPress site. So if we scroll down, you can see everything is showing up exactly as we would expect it to. Everything has been converted over perfectly. If we come over to blog, for example, and we go into there, there's our blog posts, which we can click to go and take a look at our blog posts. And hopefully what you can see is it is fast. Now, obviously, there is a bit of an issue there with that not being positioned correctly. So there is a little bit of a glitch kind of going on there. Let's go to the About page. And as you can see, everything is loading in correctly on there. We come to Contact. There's our contact page, and because we're using contact form 7, this will integrate into the Stratic platform. So providing you're using the right tools that are supported by the Stratic servers, you should still be able to get things like your emails and so on coming through from the forms. And if you're doing this because you want to work with Elementor, the Elementor Pro forms do work with Stratic, so you don't have a problem there. Okay, so we've seen that everything is working the way it should do on our preview site. Let's just jump back into WordPress. Let's close this down, and let's just go make a quick change. Let's go into our pages. Let's open up our home page, and let's just change something on there. So we'll come into our home, we'll edit this with Elementor, and now let's just make a quick change. We'll just change this title. There we go. And while we're at it, let's go and change the image as well, is it? There we go. So we've made some changes to this. You can see we get the update option, which we'll click to update, make sure everything is saved. But you also notice we get the Stratic publishing options, at which point we can go ahead, full publish this to the preview, quick publish to preview, or selective publish to preview. Each one of these will give you information about how these features work. So the full publish we've already seen. Quick publish will basically say if you made changes to a page or post in bits and pieces, this is a quicker way than pushing everything over, and only your changes kind of get pushed over. Generally, that's going to be perfectly fine. We can also go ahead and see we've got the selective publish to preview, which will only push over the active URL that we're currently editing or working with. And the same goes if we switch to the live. You'll see currently we only have the full publish to live, but once we've published that, we'll then have the same options as we do inside the preview section. So let's just say we want to quick publish to preview. We'll select that. That's now going to go ahead and push over the changes for this page over into our actual preview site. So once that's finished, we'll go ahead and take a look at that. As you can see, this is not taking too long, obviously depending upon the complexity of the site, how busy the servers are, those kinds of things. So this generally should take less time than the full publish. And again, I'm not going to speed this up because I want you to see how long this is typically going to take. If you're working with an Elementor based website, if you're working with, well, just a WordPress based website, where there's going to be much of a difference if you're working with Elementor, whether you're working with just WordPress and Gutenberg and so on, we'd have to see. So there you go. Our updates have been published. We can close that down. Let's just jump back over to our site and go to our homepage where we made those changes. And there we go. Everything is updated and been pushed to the preview site. So that's how easy that side of things is. Let's just jump back out of this and go back into our dashboard. We're going to also hop back over into our Stratic account and go to the live connection info. So this is our live site. Let's go ahead and open that up in a dedicated tab. We'll close our test site down. And you can see we're getting the same message saying, hold your horses, nothing's actually here because we haven't pushed the site to the live server. And again, if we cut to the domain, you can see live is inside that domain URL. Now, obviously, like I say, this would be different if you're using your own dedicated URL. You'd lose all that kind of information and it'd be replaced with your dedicated proper domain URL. But for this example, using the tests, you can see live and preview and so on are included. So let's go back to our site details. Sorry, let's go back to our site itself. Let's come back out of this and go back to our dashboard. Let's go over to the live option and let's full publish to the live. Now, I'm not going to run this in real time. You saw how quick it was to push it to the preview. It's not going to be much different to push it to the live. It's still going to be relatively similar when you're actually pushing this over to the live version. So we'll speed this up and come back and take a look in a moment. And there we go. That's now been pushed over to the live site. So what we can do is we'll just leave that there. We'll go back to the tab we already had open and we'll just refresh this. And there you can see now is the live version of our Stratic delivered site, no longer using WordPress as the editing platform. So if we come out to the blog, for example, and open up one of the blog posts, you can see everything is in place. Everything's working the way you'd expect it to. Now, the other thing that's worth noting is you may be thinking, well, if we no longer have that database connection, how are we going to use search? Well, one of the parts of the process of converting the site from WordPress and dynamic sides of things over through the Stratic servers to a static version site, not so easy to say, it changes things over and implements its own search algorithm, still allowing us to go ahead and search for things. So let's test that out. Let's go back to our blog and let's just grab one of these words. So audio, we'll just do a search on there and we'll just type in audio. And then we can see we've found results with that information in it. So the search is still working, which is great to see. And if we go ahead and open that up, you can see, even though we've got that weird thing with the gallery inside there, which we need to rectify, the search is working. So you still have the benefit of searching, especially when you've got bigger sites with lots of information on. The last thing you want to do is lose the search options. And that's basically how you'd go about using Stratic. So now we've kind of covered how to use Stratic, why you may want to take a look at it. One final thing we need to do, and that's quickly run some benchmarks to see how things stack up when it comes to moving things over to Headless WordPress. Now, obviously, there are more benefits than just the speed improvements. We've already talked about security and things like that. They're obviously going to be big, useful improvements. However, we should expect to see some kind of speed benefit by moving over to static resources. So let's take a quick look at the result that I've just got from using GTmetrix. I've literally just run this. And as you can see, we're getting across the board for performance and structure a 96 and an A rating, which is not perfect, but it is pretty good. A pretty respectable largest content full paint of less than a half a second and total blocking time of 154 milliseconds. So really, really pretty much nothing, minimal. You can see we've got a couple of suggestions which we might want to improve upon on our page load, the size of our page and so on, because we do have quite a graphically intense page. You can see there's a lot of images going on. So there's already things we could do with a design like this where we might want to optimize the page layout and so on. But I think that's a pretty respectable score coming back. Let's run the same test now over on Google PageSpeed Insights. We'll drop in the same URL and hit analyze on there. So taking a look at the score, when we get the results back, you can see we're getting 69 when it comes to the performance on mobile, which is okay. There's obviously a little bit of work left there to do. Just primarily taking a look at things like the first content, full paint, time to interactive, and so on. If we run over to the desktop, you can see we are getting a much more acceptable score on there. So there's still a little bit of work left to do, but generally we do have a relatively solid starting point, removing the requirement for all that dynamic data, improve security and those kinds of things using Headless WordPress. It does take a little bit of getting used to because it is a slightly different way of working to working inside a normal standard WordPress setup. But hopefully what you can see, it's not that complicated. It just takes a little bit of thought and planning because you have those three distinct different stages of working: the WordPress side of things, the preview version, and the live side. So next of all, let's take a quick look at the pricing structure that's currently available and talk about some of the options and alternatives that are available you may want to consider if you are looking at going headless with WordPress. So jumping over to the Stratic site, this is the current pricing. Whether this will change because Elementor's taking over, I would very much doubt, because chances are they're going to operate as two semi-independent companies, and I can't imagine they're going to put the prices down. They may increase, they may open up packages that include Elementor Pro as part of the whole package. We'll have to wait and see. But currently, if you go onto a monthly price plan, you can see this is starting at $45 for a single site, with unlimited visits, 5 gigabytes of storage, and up to 40,000 URLs, which should be perfectly fine for most use cases. Obviously, you want to take a look through and see what other options are included in there. You've got a 20 gigabyte CDN bandwidth limit, so you need to look at how busy your site is. And then your seats can kind of increase from there. So if you want to go to 5 websites, it increases to $250 per month, with 3 websites, sorry, not 5. So they don't scale proportionally. As you can see, they scale slightly differently. If you jump over to annual, you do save yourself 2 months worth of charges, and you can see that pushes the pricing down ever so slightly as well. So this is the pricing currently. If you move over to something like WP Engine, which also offers headless WordPress with their new Atlas solution, again, we've got a free sandbox which we can spin this up and test this out. And if you'd like me to test out the WP Engine version using this sandbox, let me know in the comments below. But as you can see, their pricing, and this is going for annually as opposed to monthly. So let's switch over to monthly first of all. You can see you're talking $29 per month, but billed at $37 a month after the first month. So it's a little cheaper. And if you move that over into annual, you can see that drops it down to, well, £293 per year, or if we go to dollars, around about $392. But what you do get is slightly higher options inside here. You can see 25,000 visits per month, 10 gigabytes of storage instead of 5, with 50 gigabytes of bandwidth per month. And that will ramp up depending upon how many sites you want included, and so on. You can obviously go down the route of using plugins for WordPress, which will allow you to do basically the same kind of thing, to allow you to use WordPress and then auto-generate the static version of it, and there are various different options available. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because that is a slightly different beast, even though technically it's doing a very similar thing. So if you want to read the information about Elementor acquiring Stratic, I'll put a link to this blog post in the description below, so you can check that out for yourself. But what do you think of this acquisition by Elementor of Stratic and moving over to a potential headless platform for WordPress, and all the benefits and some of the restrictions that brings with it? Could you see yourself jumping over to this? Do you think this is going to replace the cloud platform that they brought out recently in the future? Or do you think this is just way too expensive for what you or your clients would actually want out of using WordPress? Let me know in the comment section below, because I'd love to get your feedback, your input, and all your comments and questions inside there. As always, all the applicable links are down below. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.